Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network's Deep Dive. I want you to just imagine for a second, trying to fit 50 years of marriage into a box,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
right? Like every single argument, every cup of coffee you shared at 6 in the morning, the inside jokes, the mortgages, the vacations.
The whole weight of a life.
Exactly. The sheer, unimaginable weight of a shared life. And trying to fit all of that into a container that's, what, exactly 6 inches wide?
It's physically impossible.
Right. It's physically impossible. And yet, when you look at the traditional end-of-life industry, that's exactly the paradigm we're presented with.
Yeah, that's the standard default.
If you've ever stood in a traditional cemetery, you know the feeling. You look out over the landscape, and you're just confronted with this massive, perfect spreadsheet of rectangles.
A very organized spreadsheet.
Highly categorized. I mean, it's singular names on singular stones laid out in an absolute grid.
And it is an architecture built entirely on isolation. Historically, the way we process finality has been incredibly compartmentalized. The industry, and honestly, just our cultural practices, they've always favored clear boundaries.
Right, clear lines.
Exactly. We draw a line around an individual, we mark their specific dates, and we place them in their designated separate square.
Which, works flawlessly on paper. One plot, one person.
Yeah.
It's clean, it's organized, it makes the landscaping really easy.
Sure does.
But then you look at how human beings actually operate, and that neat little grid feels not just inadequate, but almost completely detached from reality.
Yeah, human relationships are not spreadsheets.
They are profoundly messy, they're deeply intertwined. And for a lot of people, the concept of being separated into distinct, solitary boxes after a lifetime of shared existence is just unthinkable.
Completely unthinkable for many families now. The shift we're seeing in the data is profound. We are moving away from that era of solitary, institutionalized mourning.
And moving towards something far more integrated. Okay,
Yeah.
let's unpack this. Our mission today is to look at exactly how we preserve shared legacies.
And it's a fascinating topic.
It really is. And we aren't just going to look at the boxes themselves. We need to explore the physical engineering, the emotional architecture of these memorials.
Right, the psychology behind it.
Exactly. And examine how shifting cultural and religious trends are fundamentally redefining the concept of together forever. So we pulled together this fascinating stack of research, educational resources, and sociological essays provided by the funeral program site.
They do great work compiling this data.
They really do. They're a platform dedicated to helping families navigate these incredibly complex cremation and memorial options. So when we think of memorials, we default to the solitary statue. What happens when until death do us part feels like a premature cutoff?
To understand the mechanics of why these shared memorials are gaining such massive cultural traction, we need to strip down the definition.
Okay.
We have to look at how they deviate from the baseline standard of cremation, because the singular approach is what most families are just conditioned to expect.
Right. So let's look at the foundational architecture, drawing from the resources they provided. At its absolute core, a companion urn is a specialized memorial container engineered with the singular purpose, right?
Yes, to hold the cremated remains of two individuals.
It is a vessel constructed specifically for unity. It completely defies the spreadsheet.
It does. And the distinction between the traditional single urn and the companion urn is stark when you break it down across the functional metrics provided in the research.
Let's run through those metrics. First, capacity.
Right. A single urn is built for one human body's worth of remains. A companion urn, mathematically and physically, must be scaled up to hold two.
Makes sense. But the divergence really happens at the structural level, doesn't it? The compartments.
Yes. A standard urn is just a single, empty chamber. A companion urn introduces a layer of engineering complexity. It features either a shared massive interior chamber or dual, completely separated internal compartments.
Okay, I want to bookmark that structural difference, because the choice between separated or shared chambers, that has to have massive psychological implications for a grieving family.
Yeah.
We definitely have to dig into that mechanism shortly.
Oh, we absolutely will. It's a huge decision point. But continuing with the metrics, this structural difference changes the fundamental purpose of the object.
How so?
Well, a single urn functions as a monument to individual identity. A companion urn functions as a monument to a relationship.
I see.
It's a shared tribute, which completely dictates the symbolism. We move from a symbol of personal, solitary remembrance to a physical manifestation of companionship.
And finally, the use case shifts from single cremations to couples
Hmm.
or increasingly broader family memorials.
Exactly.
Now, regarding who actually uses these, because the immediate knee-jerk assumption, at least for me, is that we're talking exclusively about married couples.
Right, that's the stereotype.
Yeah, people who have spent 40 or 50 years together building an entire universe under one roof.
Hmm.
But looking through the sociological data in the materials, this isn't strictly limited to romantic partners.
No, not at all. And that is a critical evolution in how society views bonds.
Really?
Yeah. While lifelong partners certainly make up the primary demographic, the data explicitly highlights that companion urns are increasingly being utilized by siblings,
Wow, siblings.
or by parents and their children, or even by platonic friends who shared a profound, defining connection. The industry is recognizing that preserving a deeply meaningful emotional bond after death shouldn't be restricted by marital status.
That's incredible. I mean, I think about two siblings who maybe survived a massive historical trauma together or, just lived together their entire lives.
Exactly. Why separate them?
Right. Why should the funeral industry force them
Yeah.
into separate plots? But let me push back a bit on the mechanics of how this actually plays out in the real world. We often hear about companion urns in the context of meticulous pre-planning.
Yeah.
Like a couple sits down with a lawyer in their 60s and charts everything out. Is this always a calculated, premeditated choice?
Not always, no.
Or do families ever pivot to this spontaneously after a sudden loss? Because grief doesn't usually lend itself to complex architectural planning.
What's fascinating here is the duality of the decision-making process. You are correct that a vast number of these are selected during active pre-planning.
Right, the lawyer scenario.
Yeah. A couple makes the conscious choice, while both are healthy, to dictate the terms of their legacy. They are essentially building their own emotional monument in advance.
Which is very pragmatic.
It is. But the post-loss scenario is equally prevalent and psychologically complex. Imagine a surviving spouse passes away 15 years after their partner.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The children, who are now managing this grief, might look at the solitary urn sitting on the mantle and feel an overwhelming psychological need to reunite their parents.
So they are actively fixing a perceived separation.
Exactly. They will purchase a new companion urn, transfer the remains of the first parent, and introduce the remains of the newly deceased.
Wow.
They are making an active, spontaneous decision to retroactively enforce that unity. The urn, in that moment, ceases to be just a container and becomes an active tool for the family to perform a reunifying ritual.
They are honoring the invisible space, the dynamic that existed between those two people.
Yes.
It's like the physical manifestation of an invisible bond. But moving from the philosophy to the sheer physics of this, because understanding the emotional drive leads us directly into a major logistical hurdle.
The space requirement.
Yes. How exactly does a single vessel physically accommodate the mass of two entire lifetimes? This brings us to the actual architecture of unity, the size, the structure, and the literal space these objects demand.
The physical reality of human cremation is a matter of volume. Based on the industry standards outlined in the research, an average adult cremation yields remains that require approximately 200 cubic inches of containment space.
Okay, so for you listening, to visualize 200 cubic inches, think of a solid cube that is roughly 6 inches on every side, or about the size of a standard 1-gallon milk jug.
That's a good comparison.
That is the spatial footprint of one human life post-cremation.
Therefore, a companion urn has to double that spatial requirement. It needs an interior volume of roughly 400 cubic inches, often more depending on the thickness of the material and the internal engineering.
So we are talking about an object the size of a microwave.
In many cases, yes. These are substantial, heavy objects. They possess an undeniable physical gravity in whatever room they're placed in.
Right, you don't just slide a 400 cubic inch bronze vault behind some paperbacks on a bookshelf.
No, you definitely don't.
It alters the center of gravity in a living space.
But earlier, we bookmarked the internal structure. It's not just a giant hollow cavern. The manufacturing of these urns addresses a very complex emotional dilemma through internal engineering.
Yes, the resources detailed two entirely different internal architectures.
Let's start with the first one, the dual or separated compartments. In this configuration, the urn is constructed with a solid physical barrier down the middle. There are two completely distinct chambers, almost always accessed through two separate sealed panels on the bottom or the back.
Okay.
So the ashes of person A and person B are placed in the same overall vessel, but they never physically touch.
And the second architecture is the shared chamber. No walls, no barriers. A single, unified interior volume where the remains of both individuals are poured into the exact same space.
Right, they physically mingle.
And that engineering choice is profoundly heavy. The decision between a barrier and no barrier isn't driven by manufacturing costs, is it?
Not at all. It is driven by intense psychological preference, deeply rooted family dynamics, and occasionally strict religious mandates.
I can imagine.
Some theological frameworks require the distinct preservation of individual remains, while other belief systems view the physical mingling of ashes as the ultimate, beautiful culmination of a marriage.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I look at the dual chamber design, the one with the wall in the middle, and it acts as the ultimate psychological pressure valve for a grieving family.
It really does.
Imagine you have a deeply divided family. The deceased parents always wanted to be completely mixed together, but the surviving children are horrified by the idea of physically mingling human remains.
They find it distressing.
Right. How does this architecture literally solve a family crisis?
Well, the dual-chamber urn serves as the perfect structural compromise. It operates on two different levels of perception.
Okay, break that down for me.
Internally, it provides boundaries. The anxious children have the absolute, verifiable peace of mind knowing the remains are physically contained and distinctly separated.
It satisfies their need for order and propriety.
Exactly. But externally, the presentation to the world is a single, unbroken monument.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It sits on the mantle projecting absolute, seamless togetherness, fulfilling the parents' desire to be viewed as an inseparable unit. The architecture itself absorbs the family tension.
The object does the emotional heavy lifting. And this memorialization ecosystem often expands beyond just that central 400 cubic inch anchor. The research notes families don't usually stop at the main urn.
No, they frequently create a network of objects. They incorporate matching keepsake urns.
Keepsake urns.
Yes, these are miniature versions, holding perhaps just 1 or 2 cubic inches of ashes, designed to be given to children or close relatives who live far away.
So the geographical footprint of the memorial spreads out.
Yes. They also integrate matching frames, specialized candle holders, or memorial jewelry infused with a microscopic amount of the ashes.
Wow.
The main companion urn acts as the sun, and these smaller keepsakes orbit it, allowing multiple family members to physically interact with the legacy.
Which brings us to the surface level. The physical size is dictated by the 400 cubic inch volume requirement. The internal layout is dictated by family psychology. But the exterior material, the actual surface that surviving loved ones will look at and touch every single day, that has to carry the personality of the relationship.
Yes, it does.
Choosing the material isn't just an aesthetic choice. It's a narrative choice.
The materials cataloged in the sociological essays are extensive, and each medium offers a completely different tactile experience and symbolic weight.
It's the primary interface between the living and the dead. Let's break down the mechanics of these materials because the list is fascinating. The first major category is metals.
Right.
We are talking about heavily engineered brass, aluminum, spun stainless steel, and cast bronze.
When a family selects a metal companion urn, they are psychologically prioritizing permanence.
Permanence.
Metals, especially bronze and steel, are functionally impenetrable. In the chaos of grief, when a family feels incredibly vulnerable to loss, choosing a massive, heavy, highly polished metal vault is a defensive mechanism.
A defensive mechanism. I never thought about it like that.
It is a way of saying, this relationship is now locked in, it is immune to the elements, it will survive the centuries.
It is an absolute fortress against time. But then you pivot to the complete opposite end of the spectrum with the second category. Wood.
A very popular choice.
The texts cite oak, rich walnut, cherry, maple, and mahogany. Wood is biologically porous. It expands and contracts with humidity. It ages.
And that is exactly why families choose it. Wood provides psychological comfort through its organic nature. Our brains process the tactile feedback of wood entirely differently than steel.
How so?
When a grieving spouse runs their hand over a polished mahogany urn, they feel warmth. They feel the grain, which is a literal record of time and growth.
Yeah, you can actually see the years in the wood.
Exactly. A wood companion urn doesn't feel like a sterile, defensive fortress. It feels like heirloom furniture. It implies a relationship that was rooted, warm, and natural.
So if choosing the material is like choosing the architecture of a forever home for you to consider, metal is a bank vault and wood is a cabin in the mountains.
That's a perfect analogy.
You want to touch wood, you kind of want to step back and revere metal. Then we hit the third category, marble and solid stone.
Stone carries sheer, undeniable gravity. It is heavy, both literally and metaphorically. Choosing marble suggests a relationship that was the foundational bedrock for the entire family tree. It is immovable.
Then we have the more fragile mediums, ceramic and blown glass. These are described in the text as offering intense artistic expression, vivid color variations, and highly decorative aesthetics.
Ceramic and glass are fascinating because they introduce the element of fragility. These materials can shatter,
Right.
but they also catch the light. They can be painted, glazed, and shaped into incredibly complex forms. Families who choose glass are often representing a relationship that was perhaps unconventional, deeply creative, or vibrantly colorful.
So they accept the risk.
Yes, they are willing to accept the fragility of the object in exchange for the sheer beauty of the presentation.
And finally, there is a massive shift happening with the rise of biodegradable companion urns. These are constructed from recycled paper, rock salt, sand, or plant-based polymers.
Specifically designed to break down.
Right, when buried in earth or placed in water. I have to wonder, though, is this just a modern, eco-friendly fad? Or is there a deeper mechanism at play here?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the biodegradable urn is a profound philosophical statement. Choosing a material explicitly designed to disintegrate completely upends the traditional funeral paradigm of permanence.
Because they don't want a fortress.
Right.
Yeah.
The family isn't trying to build a fortress. They are actively facilitating a return to the natural ecosystem. They are embracing the transient nature of physical existence.
That's powerful.
It really is. It is a radical acceptance that the physical bodies are gone, and the focus should be on the environmental legacy left behind.
They're letting go of the physical anchor. But regardless of the base material, whether it's impenetrable bronze or dissolving salt, the material is just the blank canvas.
Exactly.
Once the fabric of the memorial is established, we get into the actual storytelling, the customization. This is where families take a generic 400 cubic inch container and transform it into a deeply specific historical artifact.
Customization is the single most dominant trend in modern memorialization.
It really seems to be.
The industry has shifted from selling standardized, mass-produced objects to facilitating hyper-personalized tributes.
And the tools available for this are staggering. Let's look at the mechanisms of engraving. The data shows families aren't just putting name, date of birth, date of death anymore.
No, it goes way beyond that.
They are engraving the longitude and latitude of where the couple met. They are engraving specific scripture verses, the lyrics to the song they danced to at their wedding in 1974, or private inside joke messages.
They are using text to force the urn to act as a biographical document.
Yes, and then there is the visual imagery. Heart-shaped interlocking designs, doves, incredibly detailed floral patterns, sprawling oak trees with individual roots.
Which function as visual shorthand. A sprawling tree engraved on the surface isn't just decorative. It is a semiotic tool conveying the concept of a sheltering family legacy, deeply rooted and branching outward.
But the technology pushes it even further into what the research calls unique touches. Manufacturers are using lasers to burn exact replicas of the deceased's fingerprints into the metal.
It's amazing what they can do now.
They are engraving handprints, intricate military unit emblems.
And, perhaps most significantly, high-definition photography. Families are moving past simple engravings and integrating full-color photographic images directly into the surface of the urn.
Or utilizing built-in, recessed frames to display a timeline of pictures.
Right.
Okay, wait, I have to challenge this trajectory because when I look at this list, names, dates, song lyrics, GPS coordinates, intertwined wedding rings, literal laser-engraved fingerprints, and full-color printed photographs on the side of a massive box mechanically, does this not run the risk of becoming an absolute visual mess?
It sounds like a lot.
Does a memorial lose its gravitas and just become a chaotic scrapbook?
That is a very common external critique. And aesthetically, it might seem overwhelming to an outside observer, but grief psychology completely recontextualizes this. The goal of the family is not to achieve minimalist, museum-quality aesthetic perfection. The goal is emotional utility.
Emotional utility. Explain how a fingerprint provides that.
When the human brain experiences profound grief, it struggles to process the abstract permanence of death. It desperately needs concrete, specific visual data to anchor its memories.
Okay, that makes sense.
A plain bronze box is a void. It gives the grieving mind nothing to hold on to. But a fingerprint, a specific lyric, a photograph.
They act as tethers.
Exactly. Those are highly specific cognitive triggers. Every single element etched into that surface serves as a deliberate touchstone for a specific memory. It actively prevents the urn from being perceived as a sterile container of ashes.
It forces the brain to see the life, not the death.
Yeah, precisely. It becomes a dense, meticulously curated museum of that specific relationship. To a visitor, it might look cluttered. To the surviving spouse or child, it is a highly functional tool that actively facilitates the processing of complex grief.
That reframes it completely. It's a machine for remembering.
Yeah.
And the intense desire for this level of personal, hyper-specific storytelling is actually the engine driving a massive global shift in how we handle end-of-life planning entirely.
It really is.
We are witnessing a monumental pivot in cultural, religious, and geographical traditions.
The broader context here is unavoidable. The sociological data we are analyzing clearly shows that cremation rates are sharply increasing globally, and specifically across North America.
Right.
The rise of the companion urn is not occurring in a vacuum. It is a direct byproduct of this broader abandonment of traditional burial.
So what does this all mean? Why the mass exodus from the traditional graveyard? The research outlines highly pragmatic mechanisms driving this.
It comes down to practicalities for many.
First, flexibility. Families are more geographically scattered than ever before. They can't always maintain a static plot in their hometown.
No, people move constantly.
Second, pure economics and space. Urban cemeteries are running out of real estate. Purchasing 2 full-size, side-by-side burial plots, paying for 2 concrete vaults, 2 caskets, and the excavation fees, that's financially debilitating for many.
The companion urn consolidates the geographical and financial footprint exponentially.
But we cannot discuss a shift of this magnitude without looking at the theological frameworks that have governed burial for millennia. Historically, cremation has been a deeply contentious issue among major world religions.
To understand the current landscape, we have to look at how these institutions are responding to the pragmatic pressures you just mentioned. And we should view this impartially, simply tracking how doctrine adapts to societal needs.
Absolutely. Looking at the breakdown provided in the texts, Christianity has undergone a massive evolution. For centuries, traditional burial was strictly mandated.
Yes, very strict.
Today, the vast majority of major Christian denominations permit cremation, provided the memorialization process remains dignified and treats the remains with reverence. The beautifully crafted companion urn effectively bridges that gap.
It satisfies both the economic need for cremation and the theological need for respect.
Right. Conversely, looking at Buddhism and Hinduism, the theological framework has historically embraced cremation. The destruction of the physical vessel is built into the core philosophy.
Yes, very much so.
However, the exact mechanics of what happens to the ashes afterward, whether they are preserved in an elaborate companion urn in a home or scattered into a flowing body of water, varies significantly based on regional customs and specific lineages within those faiths.
And then the texts point out that traditional Judaism and Islam maintain profound, deeply rooted theological preferences for earth burial.
Right.
The physical return of the intact body to the soil is paramount in those traditions, though obviously individual practices within any large community exist on a spectrum.
What is truly remarkable is observing how, across the board, the intense logistical pressures of modern life are forcing a reevaluation of these practices.
I absolutely are.
Which brings us to the core cultural realization. We are moving away from an institutional obsession with where we are buried, the prestigious address in the cemetery.
And pivoting entirely to who we are resting with.
The focus has shifted from the geography of the graveyard to the intimacy of the vessel.
That is a fundamental rewiring of the human legacy.
But that rewiring creates a massive logistical vacuum. If we're abandoning the cemetery grid and these individuals aren't being interred in the ground, where do these 400 cubic inch, incredibly heavy, highly personalized monuments actually go?
That introduces the concept of the geography of remembrance. And the modern ecosystem offers a spectrum of placements dictated by local zoning laws and, more importantly, the psychological needs of the survivors.
Let's map out these locations based on the research. The first, and clearly the most intimate, is keeping the companion urn inside the home. Families will construct a dedicated architectural space for it, a specific mantelpiece or a custom-built shelf.
The psychology of the at-home placement is about uninterrupted continuity. By placing the urn in the center of the living room, surrounded by daily life, the deceased remain active participants in the household.
You're still part of the family dynamic.
Yes. The survivors don't have to schedule a visit to a graveyard. The emotional connection is maintained constantly, integrated into the mundane routines of making coffee or watching television.
But not everyone has the psychological endurance to live with human remains in their living room. For some, it might be paralyzing. So the second option leans back into public infrastructure, columbariums, mausoleums, or dedicated cremation niches.
These are permanent, secure architectural structures specifically designed to house urns. They offer a vital psychological separation.
The place to go.
Exactly. They give the family a dedicated, sacred destination to travel to when they wish to mourn, allowing their private home to remain a space entirely focused on the living. It provides boundaries while still offering a permanent public legacy.
The third option listed is actually burial. You can take this massive, beautiful wooden or bronze companion urn and simply bury it in a traditional plot or in an unregulated natural green burial forest.
Which acts as a transitional compromise for families caught between modern cremation preferences and a deep-seated, perhaps generational comfort with the ritual of visiting a gravesite.
But here is the scenario that genuinely fascinates me. The texts detail a hybrid approach. A family receives the 400 cubic inches of mingled ashes. They take half of those ashes and scatter them over a mountain range or into the ocean.
Right.
Then they take the remaining half, seal it inside the companion urn, and place it on the mantelpiece.
It satisfies the desire to return the physical elements to nature while retaining a physical monument for the living.
That makes sense mechanically.
Yeah.
But emotionally, let me ask you, if the fundamental purpose of the companion urn is the symbolism of ultimate inseparable unity, does taking half of the couple and throwing them into the wind dilute the symbolism of the urn?
That's a very logical question.
Right. If the box only contains 50% of the ashes, is it 50% less meaningful?
This raises an important question about how human beings interact with relics. And the psychological consensus is a resounding no. The meaning is not diluted in the slightest.
Why not?
Because the human brain does not measure emotional significance by volume or weight. The urn functions as an emotional proxy. Whether it holds 400 cubic inches of ash or 4 single grains of ash, the psychological weight of the object remains exactly the same.
It's all about representation.
It is a focal point that represents the totality of the relationship.
The object isn't just storage. It's an anchor.
Exactly. The physical placement of the urn and how much of the physical remains are inside it is entirely secondary to how the surviving family actually uses the object to navigate their own grief.
Which transitions us seamlessly into the final and arguably most important dimension of this deep dive, the psychology of healing and where this entire ecosystem of memorialization is heading next. Because these objects aren't just built to sit quietly in a corner and gather dust.
No, they are highly active. The research emphasizes that the companion urn is an active participant in the grieving process. Humans require rituals to process traumatic transitions.
We need something to do.
Yes. We need physical actions to perform to bridge the gap between the life we knew and the reality of an absence.
And the texts give vivid examples of how families are utilizing these urns to build those bridges. They are incorporating them directly into memorial ceremonies, treating the urn as the guest of honor.
Oh, absolutely.
During major holidays or anniversaries, families will physically move the urn to a place of prominence in the dining room. They lean framed wedding photos against it. They light specific candles around it.
They are essentially treating the urn as a communication device. And what is vital here is the generational impact. Think about a 7-year-old child who never met their great-grandparents.
Right.
If that child watches their parent walk up to a companion urn every year on a specific date, place a fresh flower beside it, and pause in silence, that child is learning an incredibly complex lesson about legacy, respect, and enduring love.
The urn stops being a receptacle for the dead and becomes a teaching tool for the living.
A teaching tool, yes.
It's an heirloom of emotional intelligence. But as we look at how future generations will interact with these objects, the funeral program site research outlines emerging trends that completely alter the mechanics of how these heirlooms function. The future of the companion urn is highly digital.
It is. The intersection of ancient grief rituals and modern technology is rapidly expanding. We are moving beyond engraved text and laser-etched photographs.
So what?
The most startling trend is the integration of digital technology directly into the physical architecture of the urn.
Specifically, QR codes. Manufacturers are seamlessly embedding or engraving permanent QR codes into the bronze, the wood, or the glass of these companion urns.
When a descendant or a visitor scans that code with their smartphone, the physical urn acts as a digital bridge. It connects the user instantly to a secure online tribute portal.
Scanning a QR code on a gravestone or an urn is technically simple, But philosophically, that completely shatters the historical paradigm.
It really does.
For millennia, a memorial has been a static, silent object. You look at it, and your brain has to do all the work of remembering. But now, it's an interactive gateway.
Right, it does the remembering for you.
You scan the urn, and suddenly you are looking at a high-definition video of your grandparents laughing on a beach in 1995. You are reading digitized letters they wrote to each other during a war. You are hearing their actual voices.
It transforms the memorial from a passive monument into a dynamic, updating archive. The physical object on the mantle is no longer the end of the story. It is simply the access point to a vast interactive history.
And alongside this digital integration, the aesthetic trends are pushing toward completely bespoke avant-garde designs. Families don't want anything that looks like it came from a catalog.
No, they want art.
They want companion urns that look like abstract, high-end gallery sculptures. But through all of this, through the QR codes, the dissolving salt urns, the dual-chamber engineering, the core mechanism remains untouched.
The technology and the materials evolve, but the human psychological need driving the creation of the companion urn is immutable.
It is the desperate, beautiful human desire to preserve connection against the absolute finality of death. We've covered an immense amount of ground today on how we engineer these legacies.
We really have.
To distill this deep dive into the absolute essentials based on the materials we've explored, a companion urn is not merely a 400 cubic inch container designed to solve a spatial problem.
It is an architectural solution to a profound emotional need. It provides a physical mechanism for two people to permanently reject separation.
We've seen how the internal engineering, whether dual chambers that act as a psychological pressure valve for a divided family or a shared chamber that mingles the physical remains, directly addresses complex family dynamics.
We've explored how the specific tactile and physical properties of materials, the defensive permanence of metal, the biological warmth of wood, the radical acceptance of biodegradable elements allow families to project the personality of a relationship onto an object.
And we've seen how these highly customized, deeply personal monuments are acting as the vanguard in a massive cultural pivot away from their rigid institutional grids of traditional cemeteries.
Yes, moving us toward a future where we prioritize the intimacy of who we are with over the geography of where we are placed.
Ultimately, these objects serve as vital active tools that allow surviving generations to anchor their grief, perform necessary rituals, and tangibly interact with their own history.
They're essential tools for processing grief.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought. A massive shift is occurring as we attach QR codes and digital archives to these ancient symbols of grief. If we are turning the companion urn into a multimedia portal, are we fundamentally changing the core mechanism of mourning?
That's a huge question.
Traditionally, standing before a memorial required a silent internal reflection. The silence forced you to sit with the weight of the absence. But if scanning a code immediately floods your phone with videos, voices, and interactive timelines, are we replacing that necessary difficult silence with aggressive, high-definition stimulation? Does the memorial stop being a quiet place to process a loss and instead become a medium that actively refuses to let the past go quiet? Are we changing the memorial from a period at the end of a sentence into a conversation that never actually ends?
Wow.
It is something to deeply consider the next time you find yourself standing before any monument to the past. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.